So as she said, I'm Katrina Bradley. I'm a Baha'i member. I've been a Baha'i my entire life, but it's not always the case. A lot of Baha'is become Baha'is at some point, but I happen to be born into the faith. At 15,
really want to do
is
this.
when you choose whether this makes sense for you or something else makes sense for you. So it made sense for me. I have a few things to hand out to you guys. I understand that you're studying the elimination of prejudice this weekend, so I've got a little handout based on that. And then the second one is just some real basic foundation kind of information. And the third one is a request. I request that you guys help me out with some statements. So as we go through on a lot of the slides, there'll be quotes, and if somebody could read it well when we get to it, I would really appreciate it. So if you don't want to, you don't have to.
We just have to speak up so that our people online can hear.
Yes, we are joined with one of our members is in Sheridan. Okay. She recently fell, and so she's stuck there.
And we have a couple other people, Reverend Elizabeth Mount from Cheyenne and Kathy Selden. I'm not sure where Kathy's from, but she's also on here. So.
Sure, sorry. So I'll give you mine next. Didn't I get the background? Yes. There you go. Speaking of. Yes, she might have said something. Apologize, I'm out of handouts.
Great, just so you can get back to class.
Thank you. All right, so generally the way I like to do this is I like to, it works better to have a conversation because we're all going to be real bored if I talk to you for an hour and a half. So any questions, any comments you have, please don't hesitate to just jump in. I'm open to answer any question, discuss any idea, whatever, because this presentation is for you, not for me. So I guess I would start off by saying that as a member of the Baha'i faith, I don't speak for the Baha'i faith. I can tell you my understanding of things, but I can't tell you, anything official. We have no clergy in the Baha'i faith. So there's not someone who's going to tell you this is what it means, or this is what's so, outside of, the writings that we have. So to start off with, then, does anybody have any questions or comments that you want to get out of the way right up front?
I know there's
No clergy.
clergy. Is there a recent central figure? Hadn't there been some like teachers or what?
Sure. So the Baha'i faith started with the Bab, and that translates as the gate. And he was the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, who's the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. Then after that, his son, Baha'u'llah's, Abdul Baha, was the central figure of the faith. And then his grandson, who was Shoghi Effendi, and all of this came down through the writings so that there's no dissension. So it was always, in their will and testament, they would say who was the next central figure. After Shoghi Effendi died, he didn't have, any children. So They went back to the writings, and what Baha'u'llah had designed was what's called the Universal House of Justice. And that is a body of 9 members who are now the center of the faith.
And are those divine physicians or the divine? Because
Okay, so the divine physician would be, in this case, Baha'u'llah, but a divine physician would be what we would call a manifestation of God. So one of God's great teachers. So that would be like Jesus, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah, Moses. Any of those could be considered the divine physician.
and so the 9 figures, where do they live, or where is that? So,
The Universal House of Justice?
okay, yeah.
Yeah, they're in Haifa, Israel.
Yes.
Is it the Universal House of Justice or the International?
The Universal House of Justice. Yeah. I have some, passing around, I have some pictures of shrines in the gardens there.
That's beautiful.
You wanna just pass it around and
And for those that are part of the regular cohort of the Voices program, on page 3 of your schedule, I included a picture of the temple in Santiago, Chile.
So how many temples, or is that a rare thing, or is that a,
so there's one on each continent.
okay,
The one in the US is in Chicago.
okay,
And then there are, just in recent years, there have been more local temples being built. But the Baha'i houses of worship are open to anybody. You're welcome to visit. They're for the whole community. They're a gift to the community as a whole.
We've been to one in Chicago also.
Uh,
Beautiful building.
Yeah. Anything else? Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
so is a lot of the membership like you, where they've kind of grown up in it, and so,
I would say most people are not. Most people
Okay.
found it, as teens or adults.
okay,
And that's partly because it's still, spreading, and a lot of people haven't heard of it. Maybe some of you didn't hear of it before this, experience. So,
so a lot of them are converts.
yeah.
Okay,
Although, they say it's about 600,000 in the world, is that?
Price?
Yeah,
No, it's somewhere between 5 and 7 million.
okay, I don't know where I got that.
Yeah.
So,
Is there a particular country that it's stronger in, that they're more percentage wise?
there are a lot of Baha'is in India. That's probably the largest population of Baha'is, percentage wise. Always population otherwise too, probably, but percentage wise, that's probably the largest. There are also some countries where it's a little bit hard to say. For example, in Iran, where you can be severely persecuted for being a Baha'i, they don't have record numbers, they don't have records of it because it would be harmful to people to have those records. But we have some friends from there who have estimated that it's up to a third of people there. So, but there's really no way to know, because it wouldn't be safe. Right. So.
Does the word translate to something? Does Baha'i translate this?
Yeah, so it's the power of Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah means the glory of God.
That's Arabic?
Yes. Yes, Sally?
Also, the different religions that you embrace have been Moses, Abraham.
Yes.
What did describe the relationship to those figures?
Well, I'm gonna try to answer your question if I don't.
Can
jump
you
in.
repeat the question so that people online can hear?
I think
somewhat?
I think what she's asking is, how would we describe the relationship of Baha'is with the prophet founders of previous faiths? Is that about right, Sally? Okay, so what we call it is progressive revelation, and you may have heard that term before, but the idea is that Baha'is believe that there's only one God, and we believe that God has promised, throughout the ages in every religion, that he's never going to leave mankind alone. So the way that gets handled is that over time, a couple of things happen. The first thing that happens is humanity matures. We get to where we can handle more. The second thing that happens is religion decays as you get further away from, from the start of the religion. Human beings may make misinterpretations and various things happen. So it gets diluted in some ways. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but so for those reasons, we have progressive revelation. God doesn't leave us alone. As we can handle more, and as older religions die off or lose their potency, he sends a new teacher each time. So that's what we look at as progressive revelation. So we believe that all of those messengers from previous revelations are bringing the same essential message from God. The differences that we see in religions come from the religion is designed for the people of that time and place. So there are differences in practices, but not in principles. The principles of all the religions are the same. Yes.
Does that mean you're open to something coming next?
Yes. Yeah. So
If you
Baha'is,
could tell me what that is, I'd like to get on it early. I think there's a lot of money in there. When you got print stuff, build stuff, big bucks in this.
they're not going to be here. Allah tells us that there will not be another manifestation of God for at least 1,000 years.
Ouch.
And that, if you look at it historically, that plays out about right. It's about every 1,000 years, give or take, that we get a new messenger from God.
So the principles remain the same. You said something way.
The practices.
The practices, that's right.
Do the Baha'is have could you have a certain day in which you do worship? Or,
So I think you're asking is like, what's church look like?
yeah, what day of the week,
Yeah. So in the Baha'i faith, we don't go to church once a week, like what you're probably used to. We have what's called the 19-day feast, which is coincidentally every 19 days. That's a Baha'i month. So it would be once every Baha'i month. And it has 3 parts to it. It has the devotional part, which is where we pray together and worship. It has the sort of the business portion, where we talk about whatever community issues we may need to look at. And then it has a social portion, is exactly what it sounds. No, one day.
Oh,
Yeah.
Once a month, 19.
Once every 19 days, once a Baha'i month.
so this is similar to Christianity when people come just Christmas and Easter.
So,
Even.
yeah. We also have a lot of holidays that we celebrate that would be more analogous to Christmas and Easter.
I was making fun of this.
Yeah, nothing anybody says is going to hurt my feelings. So please feel free to say whatever is on your mind.
Well, so I'm going to ask you, what are the manifestations of God as your faith recognizes them? I know you mentioned Jesus before. Jesus was one of them, but then also what holidays do you celebrate? Do they correspond to these faiths that we already know, or are they completely different?
All right, so the manifestations, if I can get them all. Abraham, Krishna, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah. Baha'is don't believe that those are the only manifestations that have ever come, but those are the ones that we have any kind of historical record of. There have always been teachers to mankind.
And how many of them are there? There's
9.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then in answer to the question about holidays, we have 9 holidays. 9 is a big number in the Baha'i faith. So we have, in fact, right now is the Festival of Rizwan, which is 12 days long. We celebrate the first day, the 9th day, and the 12th day. And Rizwan is very special in the Baha'i faith because this is when Baha'u'llah declared to the people who he was. So it's a beautiful story. And then we just recently celebrated Nowruz, which is the Baha'i New Year. And you'll see that celebrated in like Persian culture. What else? We have the birth of Baha'u'llah. We have the ascension of Baha'u'llah. We have the birth of the Bab, the ascension of the Bab. So, yes.
When you said see it celebrating Persian culture, including not Baha'i?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit distinct in how Baha'i is celebrated because it does fit with the Baha'i calendar as the official New Year. But for Persians, Persian culture in general.
Even Muslim?
Yes,
So it's a little hard to come out and be counted, but a little bit's okay, like a holiday or so.
well, because it comes out of a Persian culture initially, because the Baha'i faith originated there. There are parallels.
Yeah, the Persian culture was originally Zoroastrian,
Mhm.
and that's where the calendar comes from.
No wonder for that relationship to them.
Yeah,
Kind of like how our Easter coincides with Passover.
yes. Yes, sir.
What keeps drawing you?
Okay, I have to think about it.
What was the question?
What draws me to the Baha'i faith? I feel like there's a number of things, over my lifetime that have kept me here. Obviously it started out, that's what my parents did, so that's what I did. But in the Baha'i faith, what's important, or really important tenet of the Baha'i faith is the independent investigation of truth. So you're really encouraged to read the writings for yourself, understand them on whatever level you understand them, and then, do your best to follow them, which, nobody's perfect, but we try. So for me, part of it is in reading the writings. I find them beautiful and touching and relevant to my life. I find a lot of guidance there. There have been a lot of times in my life where various activities within the Baha'i community really sustain my faith. It's, I don't know how to explain. When you get together with a large group of Baha'is, you're so surrounded by love. It's exactly what people are looking for when they're looking for spiritual community. And so that means a lot to me. So I guess I could say that there's kind of 2 portions. There's the individual way that I worship and that I engage with the faith, and then there's the community portion of that. It's another thing is that Baha'is are very involved in the community in terms of education. And for me personally, education is a really big part of my life, really important to me. So that's part of what keeps me involved too, is the various education opportunities. Yes.
How easy would it be for me to visit?
Very easy.
Sounds like.
Yeah. So any Baha'i activity outside of the Baha'i feast is open to everyone.
The feast every 19 days?
The feast is the one that's every 19 days. But we also sometimes have unity feasts, and anyone can come to those. So if people are curious about what a feast looks like, then we would hold a unity feast where anyone was welcome. There just might be, the reason for that would be that in a regular feast, there may be sensitive issues discussed, about community members or something like that. That would be left out in a unity feast. But everything else would be the same. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if there were secret handshakes.
No secret handshakes. Nope. But yeah,
Code words, passwords.
no passwords. Nope. You will hear Baha'is say Allah Wapa to each other. Yes, which just means God is glorious, and it's just used as a greeting. It's not a secret. Anybody can use it.
What kind of food do you have at these feasts?
Well, whatever the host decides to provide. Nothing specific. In a home. Yes, it's usually in a home. Some communities have Baha'i centers, so they would hold their feast there. But most communities are small, so we still meet it. Not a center, no. In fact, we had feast last night at Lindsay's.
And so, yes, sir. Is that, how would you, what would that be?
It's just a gathering place. It's a place where we can have children's classes and junior youth groups and study circles and feasts and holy days and.
Is there a worship room or is there more of a fellowship room with other meeting rooms?
Yeah, it's more of, it varies by community. It's different in different places, but there's not, there's not like a specific way that it would be done. So,
A lot of places do have a library and
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that.
things like the library.
But not a worship space like we call sanctuary.
Not necessarily. I mean, like when we were in Denver, we had a Baha'i center at the time and it wasn't an old church. So there was, but that's not necessarily the case.
What are the symbols of the thing?
Yeah. Again, all right.
Wow.
This is the symbols of the faith that I drew last year. This is called the ringstone symbol, and you'll find it on a lot of Baha'i jewelry. So the top line here represents God. The middle line represents the manifestations of God, and the bottom line represents humanity. And this line represents the word of God that runs from God through the manifestations to humanity. So it's just a way of explaining how we relate to God and how we relate to his manifestations as human beings. Then the stars represent the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Sally.
The little things on the middle line.
They're just, it's actually, this is a poor representation, but it's Arabic calligraphy, and that's part of the calligraphy.
Okay.
Yeah. Sally.
I found a book that was written by someone who's a member of Baha'i. It was called Mysteries of the Universe. It was a physicist that had written a book over an 18-year period. It's truly Baha'i, and it closes the book with some copies of that. Basically, he was talking about this last section of polarities that the experience. So true in nature as a microcosm, the macrocosm. It's a and I don't know what you want to do about it, but when you look behind the greater cosmic perspective, with the things that you say, yes, this helps us see what is. That's why I'm here microscopically and
You guys can part of this today, Sally. I haven't read that book, so I'm not familiar with it. But I guess I would say, that everything fits into that context, right? We have our finite understandings of things as far as we can understand it as human beings, because we're just human beings. And so in the Baha'i writings, there's a lot of metaphor, for example, that you might use nature to describe a relationship or an interaction or a way that, things work. And that applies within the individual, within the family, within the community, within society as a whole, within the way the cosmos works, right? So a lot of things can be described in those ways so that we have a greater understanding of them. Does that make any sense? Does that answer your question?
Rebecca, truly.
Okay. Yes.
Not easy concept of rest.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And living what I call some people in Christian people in the connection, but Murphy calls it like the polarity. That's at the heart of reality.
Well, and the Universal House of Justice talks about what they call false dichotomies. which is, the idea that it's either this way or that way, and it's neither. That's what false dichotomies, right? Things are never all one way or all the other way. There's always a middle ground.
Unity in diversity.
Yes, ma'am. Unity and diversity. Exactly.
And on top level, as well as department. That's what.
Yeah. Yes.
Is there a concept of sin?
Is there a concept of sin?
Thank you. I keep forgetting to repeat them. Sin is mentioned in some of the writings, but it's not like a focus like I see in Christianity sometimes, right? It's human beings sometimes make the wrong choices. Yeah, we're gonna screw up because we're human beings, and otherwise there would be nothing to learn, right? But it's more along the lines of, are you as a human being doing your best to follow God's teachings as you understand them? If you are, then you're on the right track.
Okay.
Yes.
So when we mess up, is there any language y'all have about restoration?
We have a lot of prayers for forgiveness. Again, it's for Baha'is, there's no confession or anything like that. It's really a personal matter between you and God. So if I screwed up and went home feeling terrible, I would, sit down and say some prayers about it and talk to God about it. But we do believe that God is all forgiving.
So if the manifestations, would you access any previous or other writings? Or is it mainly within the Baha'i faith writings?
Great question. So Baha'is do believe, do read the writings of previous faiths. We think that, I personally prefer the writings of Bob and Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, because I believe that they're the teachings for this day and age. That doesn't negate any of the previous teachings. It's just that these are the ones that I believe were written for me. So I can read any of them, and understand their context, and they're all going to give me the same principles. Yes.
Do you find any scriptures, stories creeping in and get repeated? I mean, like I might say something or something from another religious culture as a part of my regular English language does that happen?
Well, sure. We live in a Christian culture, right? So obviously those stories are part of the common language, but also what's really interesting is there are some quotes that are very close when you read them. Like, "Create in me a pure heart." There's it's almost a direct correlation between the Bible quote and the quote from Baha'u'llah. Is there a correlation with the golden rule? Yes, the golden rule appears in every religion. So can I quote it from the Baha'i faith? This is not going to be exact, but wish not for your brother what you would not wish for yourself. It's pretty close.
So that would be one of the principles. And what are some of the other principles that flow throughout the different manifestations?
Normal things you would think of, love thy neighbor, obviously, is really big. The value and education of children is present in religions. Kindness, generosity, all the things that we all think of as virtues flow through every religion. Yes.
About the 7 deadly sins. Or what not to do.
Yeah. So every religion has its own set of laws, and I kind of think of the 7 deadly sins as part of the set of laws. Obviously, none of those things are good for any of us, and God tries to prescribe for us what's good for us. So I think that hopefully this addresses your question. The idea behind the laws that were given you know, in each of our faiths, is that these are given to us as a gift, not as a control measure. You know, they're there for us to have the tools to live our best lives. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So my hesitation or my increased interest in asking this, within some forms of Christianity, that is spoken of more and given more gravitas.
Yeah.
What you shouldn't be doing, which then can be interpreted in negative ways or judgment. That you've seen the decline of Christianity, and that could be a part of it. So what I've heard so far is y'all are a little more focused on love thy neighbor, take care of yourself, take care of it. And so that's why I was kind of fishing for that. And I'm also wondering, like, well, no wonder they're growing. They're not beating people over the head.
Yeah. I mean, you make a really good.
I said, don't speak.
Yeah, I think that Baha'is are generally more focused on the positive, you know. And another thing is that we don't expect people who are not Baha'is to follow Baha'i laws. So there are Baha'i laws, but I have no expectation that any of you should be following if you don't want to. Because you didn't sign up for that. Prohibition on alcohol. Baha'is don't drink alcohol. But that doesn't mean that I, you know, have an issue with you guys doing it if you want to. You know, and as a matter of fact, even if other Baha'is do it, that's really mostly between them and God, unless they're, you know, out in the street shouting it to the world, right?
So you don't have that group that goes on vacation and does it, but doesn't do it where they live?
Well, you know, there may be, and it's really none of my business.
That's a good answer.
There's two of you back there.
No, but I'm just gonna say, the major religion. Emanated from the buildings. One of the is started. What's your take on
I think if we have a really complete picture, we would have manifestations from the East and the West. Again, a lot of this is lost to history. So a lot of what we know about did originate, yeah, in that Middle East area. And what's my take on that? It's an area that, you know, geopolitically gets really screwed up. And so it's a place that needs that guidance from time to time. And then it spreads, of course, to the rest of the world. Sally had one in the new chair.
I think that's a principle that you could. Be a person of compassion, reach out and do this. It's not necessarily a man, but a sense of that behind the.
Thank you. I find that to be generally true. Of course, Baha'is are also human beings and nobody's perfect. So we do screw up from time to time. But it's very deeply ingrained in the teachings, you know, how treating other people with kindness and compassion and love has to be the foundation of any relationship, whether it's your relationship with yourself, your relationship with God, your relationship with each other. Well, some days it can be hard. I guess it actually serves me really well, because one thing that I found here is that people are good about live and let live. You know, I mean, a lot of people have some pretty strong opinions, but they're also usually pretty good about letting you have your opinions. So
It's not been my experience.
I think it's not been a lot of people's experience, but it's been mine. And I wonder sometimes if it's because that's the expectation of going. You had another question.
You really didn't think, Holly, And then about the major religions where they came from. And then I'm still trying to get my head around this, Paul Taylor
Yes.
from here in town. When we met with him, he was talking about the Aboriginal indigenous going back 50,000 years. Native American going back Polynesian. I mean, there are certainly other belief systems that I tend to discount because they're not written. And that's why I'm willing to listen to you and go, we go back to Abraham and go, yeah, that's the beginning. And it just struck me as it seems a lot harder to go back
Sure.
before that.
Right, because we don't have any written ways that we can, you and I can go back and look and say, you know, we can't go back and study it without immersing ourselves in those cultures. Yeah.
Therefore,
Can I just remind everyone to speak up, please, so our Zoom audience can hear us? We have several people on there that are trying to listen in. Thank you.
Is there a hierarchy in the church? Is there like, is there like, who's the leadership?
So the question is there a hierarchy leadership structure?
Sort of. So there is a structure, we call it the administrative order, but there's not a power differential, right? So the Universal House of Justice would be the head of the faith today. But I can speak to a member of the Universal House of Justice on an equal footing. So there, a brief description would be that there are two branches of sort of leadership, which is the elected branch and the appointed branch. The elected branch starts with the Universal House of Justice. It includes national spiritual assemblies, local spiritual assemblies, you know, sort of governing bodies. And then the appointed branch, which includes basically the institution of the counselors, which is, it's more like people in advisory positions, people who may, I guess, maybe more, have spent more time studying different writings and things like that. It's not necessarily the case, but people you can ask for advice. And again, that goes, you know, all the way from the World Center down to the local level. Does that answer your question?
And on the local level, what kind of structure do you have?
So we have local spiritual assemblies, which is any place that there are 9 adult members. They would form a local spiritual assembly. And then we also have, like, for example, I'm an assistant to the auxiliary board member, which is part of that second branch that I mentioned, which is the appointed branch. So, you know, you have those complementary systems kind of at every level. Yep.
Just want to mention that this administrative order, the Universal House of Justice only has that power when they meet as a Universal House of Justice.
Yeah.
The individual members are just individual Baha'is. Same way with the local spiritual assembly and the national spiritual assembly. It is that meeting, it's that developing of consensus and prayer and meditation where we believe that's where the authority comes from, not the individual.
How often does that?
Well, each community will establish their own schedule, usually within every Baha'i month. They would have a local spiritual assembly meeting, but the Universal House of Justice is year round.
Yeah.
Oh, they're always in.
I mean, they travel back and forth, but they can pretty much meet at the drop of a hat.
Well, the reason I ask is within Methodism, United Methodism, that body is the general conference, meets every 4 years. And then there's some other stuff that can go on and checks it out, and that's of course one of the problems that COVID threw our way, and it's contributed to some current issues with lack of decision making.
The Universal House of Justice is elected for a 5-year term, and then they are a standing body.
I mean,
Yeah. And they're being elected right now.
is it too late?
Well, there are no nominations, no campaigning, and I don't know that you could get in there. Yeah.
Yeah, a Baha'i election is very different from what we're used to, at least in the US. There's no, nobody says, hey, I want to run. There's no nominations. There's no discussion about who you're going to vote for. Votes are completely in secret. It's very reverent atmosphere. So it's not, it eliminates all the bickering, partisanship, all of that. You simply vote for the person you think, or people, depending on what you're voting for, the person or people you think best qualified to do the job.
Do you have to do sometimes more than one voting to get things done?
Occasionally, yeah,
We have that within our bishops.
okay.
We tried and nobody quite made it, and then we do it again.
Yeah, so, I mean, Baha'i communities are still small enough that generally if you're voting for 9 people, it works out pretty well. But, if you're voting for officers, it sometimes gets a little bit more complicated. A local spiritual assembly will have a secretary, treasurer, chairperson, and vice chairperson. And, when there's 9 of you there, you might get ties and then you just revote. But there's no discussion about it. It's just, this person got 4 and that person got 4. Let's do it again.
So, and I may have missed this. Is someone from your local spiritual assembly a member of the Universal House of Justice?
No. So,
How they get?
so what happens is that there are units within the Baha'i faith, which are, kind of like broader geographical areas. The units every year have a convention, and we elect the delegate who goes and votes for the National Spiritual Assembly. And that happens every year. Then every 5 years, all the national spiritual assemblies go to Haifa and vote for Universal House of Justice. No, there are national spiritual assemblies. Yeah, Mark, yeah, a lot. Pretty much every nation in the world. Sally?
We move on to talk about other things, and you've been very eloquent, but this is a kind of first question. When it comes to how do you live your life? With these instruments, one is kind of anxiety. When it comes to automatically say, okay, this is what happens when I what's your job? This is
So I think what Sally's asking is, when I'm struggling, when I'm having some challenge in my personal life, how do I handle that in terms of spirituality?
Yeah.
Okay. So prayer would be my frontline response. Baha'i prayer is maybe a little bit different than kind of what you're used to too. Baha'is have many, many prayers that we can say. And most Baha'is have them on hand, have an app on your phone.
So they're already written down.
They're already written down, yeah. So our prayers are written by the Bab Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha. And we have kind of prayers for every occasion. And there are many, many prayers. So that's the first thing that I go to. Whether it be something as simple as saying Ya Baha'u'llah Pa, which again means the glory of God. It's another translation of that. And it's just a very quick but powerful prayer. Up to, we have some very long prayers. The healing prayer is a long, one of the long healing prayer, as opposed to the short healing prayer is a long prayer. So, there's a lot of different options there. Beyond that, consultation would be a way to handle things. I could go to my local spiritual assembly. I would obviously consult with my husband, and say, what do you think? How should we handle this? And I think also just faith. I really believe that as hard as the world may be right now, it's this way for a reason. We're learning something, we're going somewhere. And as long as that's the case, it can't be wrong. I don't necessarily understand why it's right, but I'm pretty sure it's right. Yes,
Do you have extemporaneous prayer?
can you define that for me?
Just a prayer, just.
Make it up as you go.
Off the
Oh,
cuff.
got it.
Make it
Thank
up
you.
as you go.
No Christian background, sorry. You can do that, yes. You're more than welcome to just speak your heart. What you'll see Baha'is do usually, if you ever do come to a Baha'i event, you'll probably see us read written prayers, but Baha'is certainly also talk directly to God. It's just usually more of a one-on-one thing. Yes.
So you made kind of a remark, but I could use some clarification. So you pointed to your husband about checking in. And earlier today, we heard from someone talking about abuse. And of course, the writings of Paul can be misinterpreted or used to really keep women in their place. Not my way. Stacy, can you just clean that up?
Thank you very much for bringing that up. That's
What's that desire you mentioned? What's that rooted in?
So in the Baha'i faith, consultation is really, I would consult with my husband if I had an issue. I would consult with my friends if I had an issue. But as far as the relationship between men and women are considered absolutely equal in the Baha'i faith. Absolutely equal. There's no, and that doesn't mean that they're the same. By the way, equal is not the same. There are some things that women are stronger at than men, and there are some things that men are stronger at than women, and that's what makes the world work, right? At least in part. But they're absolutely equal. I have as much say as he does in our relationship.
It's this idea of consultation.
Yes.
This is what we do. We're behind.
Well, we talk about things, we bounce it off each other. Am I missing something that you see? It's because it's those different.
But then the male does the same.
Yes, absolutely.
Because
Okay.
they bring a different perspective. to
Yeah,
things.
yeah. It's
So I'm
kind of like-
interested because Baha'i comes from the Persian culture, which would be patriarchal. How Baha'i got to the place they are now where they can say that the genders are equal.
Right.
So I don't know that you can address that in this short moment, but.
Well, the briefer answer would be that although some religions are not necessarily equal between men and women, all spiritual teachings, I think if you go back and read the original teachings, what you'll find is that equality was taught by every manifestation.
We just messed it up.
Well, sometimes you do that, we're humans. Does that help, Mary?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Looking at the pictures of this place,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of money. Where's all the money coming from?
Okay, so there are Baha'i funds. One of the things that's unique about the Baha'i funds is that only Baha'is can contribute to them. So we don't accept any contributions from anyone who's not a declared Baha'i. These things, Baha'is do, contribute to the Baha'i faith. It's a privilege that we have. We look at it as a privilege. There are, how far I want to go into this. So there are local funds, national funds, worldwide funds. We have what's called Hukukullah, which means the right of God. That would be sort of like tithing, where you contribute a certain percent. It's a percent of what you have above and beyond what you need. And that goes to things more like charity, disaster relief, that kind of thing. So all that was built with Baha'i funds.
Is it a multicultural?
Very diverse, yeah. Diversity is one of the main points of the Baha'i faith. It's in every, it's the most widespread religion in the world. It's because it's literally in almost every country, anywhere you go. The communities are small, but you will find them.
So how does one become Baha'i? Do they go to the church and confess in their feelings?
No, I don't know. No confessions in the Baha'i faith. So if a person wanted to become a Baha'i, basically you would simply, it's called declaring, and this is true for the United States. There are different processes in different countries, depending on what the circumstances are. In the United States, you would declare your faith, which would basically be saying, I believe that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of God for this day, and I'm going to do my best to follow his laws. And I can show you. Sorry. This is a declaration card. Listen. So there's both sides copied here, but
You speak Arabic
not very much, just what I've learned from Persian friends.
and the words of the.
Sure, you know, there are certain words, obviously, that most Baha'is would be familiar with.
You say it real well, so I wasn't really surprised.
Well, I didn't pronounce it exactly right, but I do my best.
We have baptism or sacraments like
Not baptism, no. Baha'is believe that the idea of that renewal of baptism is more of a spiritual renewal than a physical one. So there's no physical kind of baptism. It's really just, you know, you say, this is what I believe, and go from there. It's a long learning process too. So.
What are you using? Symbolism or?
The only thing that comes to mind is we have ablutions. Baha'is, adult Baha'is, 15 and over, have obligatory prayers that they say every day. And before we say that, we would wash our face and hands.
But not your feet.
Like the Muslims. Similar, yeah.
So one of our focus this week has been in African-American justice, racial justice. And I asked you ahead of time to give the perspective for that from the Baha'i faith. You want to say something to that, or I can read what you sent to me? How
Yeah.
you went?
Go ahead and read it, and then I'll address any comments or questions.
Largest, my eyeballs can see it. All right. From a Baha'i perspective, race, reconciliation, and equality are deeply interconnected concepts that form the foundation for building a just and unified world. Baha'u'llah, did I say it right? All right. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, teaches that all humans are equal in the sight of God, and that racial prejudice is a form of spiritual disease that must be eradicated. Like that word, spiritual disease. Therefore, true reconciliation can only be achieved by recognizing the oneness of humanity and working to eliminate all forms of discrimination. Baha'is believe that this process of reconciliation must begin with a sincere examination of our own hearts and a willingness to let go of deeply ingrained prejudices. Through prayer, study, and meaningful action, Baha'is strive to create spaces where people of all races and cultures can come together in harmony and mutual respect. By promoting the common principle of the unity of humanity, Baha'is seek to build a world where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or background. And you include a quote from Baha'u'llah: "The tabernacle of unity has been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers. Ye are the fruits of one tree, and the leaves of one branch." And then you include a link here for your effort, the Baha'i efforts for.
Right. Yeah.
I looked up that the faith started in 1844. Is that about right for you?
Yes.
So slavery was going on. How did it interact with the Baha'i faith?
Okay, so obviously in 1844, the Baha'i faith wasn't in the US yet. But you know, as it came to the US, obviously, you know, this was an issue because Baha'is here were new Baha'is and trying to learn the teachings and things like that. So, you know, sometimes they would do something that might be prejudiced without a lot of consciousness around. When Abdul Baha, who was the son of Baha'u'llah, came to the United States in 1912, he did a lot of work to correct that. There's a story of, he went to a dinner that was held at one of the, the fancy homes, and these Baha'is had planned this whole event, and, he had the special seat and everything else. And there was a black man who was a Baha'i who was left in the kitchen. And Abdul Baha, when he came in, I think he came in to bring somebody a drink. Is that?
I don't remember exactly.
Anyway, when the black man came in, Abdul Baha had him come in, sit in his right hand. He was very clear, he will be joining us for dinner. And that's the way, sort of the Baha'is in the US were taught. This, all people are one. It's usually a pretty gentle approach. There's not a lot of, you shouldn't have left him out there. It's just, this is how we treat. Yes.
Your sacred text, or how would you be able to see that?
I brought a couple of things to show you guys. This is called the Kitabi Aqdas, and you can see it also says the most holy book. The Kitabi Aqdas means the book of laws. So this is, there in the Baha'i faith, there are a lot of sacred texts. It's, they're not all translated yet, but there's, endless material, more than I could read and study in my lifetime. But anything written by the Baba Baha'u'llah or Abdul Baha is sacred text. And then Shoghi Effendi, who was again the grandson of Abdul Baha, also gave us a lot of guidance. And then I also brought this one, which is also by Baha'u'llah. It's called The Hidden Words. And what this book is, it's really great because the hidden words are all very just short little bites. And it's kind of like the instruction book for life. It's, like this is how to live.
If there was slavery in Persia back when the Baha'i faith came about?
There were servants. I don't know if there was slavery. And
Yeah, it was slavery because of the lines.
I guess that's true. Yeah. Find it. Explain.
Thank you. This guy was living. Whereas, so what I'm fishing for, I guess, is the origin of your faith had incorporated slavery as unacceptable from the beginning, which certainly is a benefit of progressive theology or development of faiths and religions.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think if you read the original text, you're not going to find enslaving people as something recommended in any religion. That's just not how we're taught to treat people, no matter what text you read. It's, again, human fallibility that's created that.
There's a lot of folks in the southern part of the United States that really use slavery as a basis and accepted them. It was okay to have slaves, just to treat them well.
That's true.
So, wow, did we mess that up?
Yeah, I think so. And then again, my personal opinion, I think that's based on misinterpretation, misunderstanding.
Don't you think you could support just about anything if you want to? Depending on how you want to interpret it.
Oh, yeah, good rational.
Yeah.
Other questions?
What else did you have on your slides that you might want to?
And we've got about half an hour.
Oh, gosh.
I cannot go through all the slides in half an hour, but a lot of it we've covered too.
Yeah.
So I can start through them. And again, still, if you have questions, jump in, because where you guys are at is way more important than anything. Okay. All right, so the first one is all peoples, one common faith. And I alluded to this a little bit when I talked about progressive revelation. When we say one common faith, we're not saying we all have to be the same religion. We're saying we're all following the religion of God. That is one common faith that we all share. So the Baha'i faith is a world religion. The purpose of the Baha'i faith is to unite all the races and peoples in one universal cause and one common faith. Which is why I explained what I mean by one common faith, because that could be misunderstood. We're not saying that everybody has to be the same religion. We're saying that we already are. And Baha'is follow Baha'u'llah, who we believe is the one who is promised in every successive word. So can somebody read that first quote for me? It's on your white paper that I handed out.
That which the Lord hath ordained to be power and remedy, instrument for the healing of the world, is the union of all its people in one universal cause, one common faith.
Thank you. So then obviously the first big concept is, what is God? Right? As I said, we believe that there's only one God. We believe that God is unknowable. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be striving to know and understand God. In fact, that's kind of our whole purpose in this life, is to try to know and understand God. However, we are human beings and our capacity is finite. So there's a limit to what we can understand because God is bigger than our capacity. So the analogy there is the carpenter who's building a table. Right? He's creating that table. The table can't understand the carpenter that built it. That doesn't mean they don't have a relationship, but the table doesn't have the capacity to understand. Doesn't have the capacity to understand. So Baha'u'llah teaches us that God is unknowable in his essence. This means that we should not make images of God in our mind, thinking of him, for example, as a man. Now, then the question that comes from that is, aren't we made in the image of God, right? And we believe that we are, but not physically. God is perfect in spiritual qualities. And our job is to strive to develop those spiritual qualities. So in that way, we are made in the image of God. In general, that which has been created cannot understand its creator. God is the creator of all things, and the reason behind our creation is love. Baha'u'llah teaches us that God loved us, and we are created from this love. So that's another common teaching that you find in every religion. Why were you created? Because I love you.
Ask a question.
Yes.
Since you get pushback from Muslims about this idea, would be the next kind of faith after them.
Are you asking if we do?
Yes.
Well, obviously that depends on the Muslim, right? Different people are going to react in different ways. We have very dear Muslim friends. And then in Iran, there's a lot of discrimination against Baha'is and persecution of Baha'is. I think personally that that's more about power and politics. If you look at religions historically, what you'll see is that every time a manifestation came, the powers of the time were the ones persecuting that manifestation. True for Jesus, true for Muhammad, true for all of them, right? And so this is the same thing. My interpretation of the seal of the prophets, which I think is kind of what you're getting at, or a Baha'i interpretation, no? Okay. Because Muslims would say that there couldn't be another one because Muhammad was the seal of the prophets, the last.
I didn't know that.
Okay, so yeah.
This is it. There's not gonna be another one.
That's main reason that they're in conflict with Sunnis and the Shiites.
Right. So, just my understanding, not an official interpretation, but my understanding is that if I put a seal on a letter, what's the purpose of that seal?
If it's broken.
Right. It's to be opened, right? It's a renewal. So again, if you look historically in the very broad perspective, there are eras in religion. We believe that Muhammad was the last in the Adamic era, started with Adam, ended with Muhammad, and that Baha'u'llah is the beginning of a new era. So that's another way to look at it.
I find this interesting because a lot of Christians would say, well, the word of God stops with revelation, you know, and so here we're being presented with this is a presentation of God. I think that's really interesting because, I mean, we'll ask all the time, well, I guess nobody said anything after Revelation, you know? And here they are. And here they are. Here they are. He's saying something.
So, I mean, it's pretty clear in the Bible that God says, I'm never leave you alone.
Right.
How can he never leave us alone if, as we continue to grow? I think of it like grades, right? I mean, I can teach math to a first grader and a 12th grader, but they don't have the same capacity for learning.
Right.
So, you know, if I've moved past that grade, God's got to give me the next lesson.
I love that you think we've grown because I sometimes feel like.
That came up to me too, like,
Always.
something in this story, right?
Because we haven't done much in 2,000 years, really. So I love that. I'm going to hang on to that and
Yeah.
work on that. Yeah.
Well, the way Baha'is look at it is that there are two processes going on at the same time: integration and disintegration. And this is true of anything in nature, right? If you take a tree, you know, that seed is growing and developing and turning into a tree and producing fruit, and then eventually the tree dies. That's the process. And right now we're in that process. We have a relatively new manifestation in Baha'u'llah, and you know, previous religions are in that decline process, and therefore the world is in that decline process. But they also, you know, they drop seeds, you know, and there's a new tree coming up that's going to be a better, you know, the next step, not better per se, but it's the next step. Yes.
Spiritual director. Do Baha'i have spiritual directors?
Can you tell me what a spiritual director does?
Director sits with someone and lets them explore their faith, where they are on their faith journey, and how what they're hearing from the divine, what they're hearing from God in their life, and how is God working in them, and how it is with their soul.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering.
I mean, we have people who would fulfill that role if someone asked for it. You know, you can certainly ask to consult with a number of people. I would say more what we do generally is along the lines of education. We have study circles.
So that can be like groups.
Yes. So like this is the first book in the study circle series for adults. It's called Reflections on the Life of the Spirit. And a study circle is just a group of people, not necessarily Baha'is, who get together and we read over some of the quotes and discuss what does that really mean. You know, so that's just one example of the way that spiritual growth occurs. Does that make sense? Of course. I was passing.
To psychology and counselors and therapists.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I was a therapist for many years. So.
What do you do now?
Well, at the moment, I homeschool, I teach swimming, and I work for Upward Bound.
And win.
And win. Yeah, but I don't get paid for win.
It's not work.
It's still work. Right. Sleep, can I sleep?
Here today, and she says, oh, no, I just started to kids.
Yeah.
I just want to point out with that last question, she really hit upon the junior youth program, because that's exactly what we have in our junior youth program at that age, which is basically 11 to 15, is helping that age start to explore their spiritual life. And we have a number of programs to talk about, like my favorite book of it is Confirmations. And we actually walk through them. And it basically, how do you listen to God? How do you look for guidance? How do you apply that in your life? So as they're starting to try to mature intellectually, we try to give them that additional education.
And this is kind of how consultation works, right? Like I heard her question one way, he heard it another way. When we bring both views together, we get a better picture. So this is how Baha'i community works, is, we all, our understandings and our points of view. And that way you come a lot closer to truth.
You want to say hello?
That would be written by her back there. So that second book is the Reasons of Confirmation that Bernie talked about. That's the first book in the junior youth materials.
So if you missed it as a kid and you come into the faith as an adult.
Well, you're welcome to read that book anytime you want to, but you can do book 5 in the series, which is about animating junior youth, and then work with the junior youth and get a much deeper understanding of the ideas in there by working with the junior youth. This is not a confirmation period. In fact, these books are actually Baha'i inspired. So they don't actually mention the Baha'i faith itself. They're for everyone. And they're dealing with these concepts that kids of that age are struggling with. So they're really for everybody.
Thank you for the clarification. But we find out if you didn't go through some of that grounding and education in your youth, then you show up and we need confirmation class or whatever for adults. And occasionally there'll be one, but still there is that challenge with integrating someone, helping them. We do it through education, Bible study. Still that struggle.
Right. Well, certainly there's that education process that anybody's going to go through when they're learning about something new. And it's probably, that Rudy book, the red book that I passed around, is a big part of that process. We have what's called firesides, where people can come and learn about different things. There's devotional meetings. So there's lots of opportunities to learn. But in the Baha'i faith, like I mentioned, independent investigation of truth is a really important principle. And so ultimately, it's it's your responsibility and your drive, Baha'is will work with you to understand anything you want to understand. But it's got to be you wanting to learn it, and you trying to read it and understand it for yourself. Baha'is will, obviously sit down and discuss it. Yeah, Mark.
I think I can address this somewhat. I was well into adulthood before I even heard the words Baha'i faith. So I came into it as someone, I actually came from a Christian background. Which is, we were talking about the different prophets, I think earlier. A huge thing for a Christian is, if you're going to become Baha'i, you're not only accepting Baha'u'llah, you also have to accept that Muhammad is a manifestation of God, every bit as much as Jesus Christ is. So, I mean, there's that. Everybody's going to have their hurdles and their walls they come up against. But for me, as far as having spiritual guides or teachers, there was one person that I met with in person. I'd go over to his house every week and just grill the hell out of this guy. And he was just giving me answers that were just blowing my mind. Well, I didn't think of it that way. I've never seen it that way. And then there were two others, one of which had died long before I was born, was William Sears, who came to the Baha'i faith through a Catholic background. And he was able to really, by reading his books, I was able to get a lot of my questions as a Christian addressed. And then the other one was Kevin Locke, who just passed away recently. I only met him in person once for 5 minutes, but by watching videos of him or reading things that he'd written, because he came from a Native American perspective, which is also profoundly important to me because I've been raised in close proximity to Native American belief and always had a deep respect for them. So between William Sears, Kevin Locke, and this gentleman that I met in person, they were kind of my three guides into the Baha'i faith. If that helps answer that question. I mean, what she said is true. Ultimately, you have to do your own work. You have to do it yourself. But that doesn't mean that God won't provide you, that the right people won't show up at you. I think there's a saying in Taoism, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. That definitely happened. That definitely happened for me.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
So the book that I just passed around is a book written by William Sears called Thief in the Night, where he actually goes through the Bible and shows, his understanding of how that pointed to the Baha'i faith.
Interesting. I just thought this picture was representative of Jesus being a carpenter. Glad you clarified.
Well,
I totally missed that.
that works too. All right, so we have 15 minutes if that clock is right. We want to keep on with the slides, or we have more questions?
Let's take one or two more slides or questions. Then we have our dinner scheduled at 5, so we'll take a short break and eat.
Sounds good. Okay, all right. Anybody want to jump in before I move the slides? Can someone read this quote? I think it's the second one.
O Son of Man, I loved thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life.
Is this from the King James Version?
That's from the Hidden Words. I read the book that I. So that's addressing why we were created, because God loved us. The eternal covenant. So in the Baha'i faith, there's two covenants. The eternal covenant is our covenant between us and God. He never leaves us alone without guidance. When we move away from his teachings, he sends us a new teacher. We've talked about that quite a bit. Then the lesser covenant is our agreement with each manifestation of God or each teacher. So that's, as a Baha'i, I'm going to follow Baha'i laws to the best of my abilities. As a Christian, you're going to follow Jesus's laws to the best of your ability. So what makes sense, in that time. So I've talked quite a bit about manifestations of God. Is everybody clear what I mean when I say that? Yeah.
So does one have to, first of all, you have to be a Christian and you have to get all that right, and then you move on to the Baha'i or the whatever was after that, Islam, and then.
No, not necessarily. I've seen people do it that way. That's a really interesting process, but no, you don't have to do it that way. That's a really long road, valuable one, but a long road. I think as a Baha'i, you accept that these previous teachers were bringing the word of God, but each religion teaches, again, the same principles. So you can start in the Baha'i faith, or you can start in Christian faith, or you can start in Islam, or you can start in Judaism, or you can start in Buddhism or Hinduism, and you're going to get the same fundamental teachings. Just the differences are, is the most updated version. 2.0. Yeah.
How does the multiple gods within Hinduism, how does that, how do you work with someone transitioning or understanding to Baha'i?
My understanding is, and this is from conversations with Hindu friends, is that Hindus actually believe that there is only one God. And what they call the different gods are different attributes or different aspects of God. So it's actually very complementary, because Baha'is focus quite a bit on those attributes of God as what we're trying to develop in ourselves.
I'd like to just add that from those friends, we realized that it's very similar to saints in Catholicism. That's how they're seen. It's a person or an image that represents a certain attribute.
And of course, the Protestants clean that up.
Do you know what the conflict is between the Hindus and the Muslims?
I don't know. Anybody? What is the conflict between the Muslims and the Hindus and Muslims?
When the British left India, they left a situation in which the differences between those two populations weren't fairly reflected. So it's essentially.
It's pretty actually.
Well, that and from the Muslim point of view, the fact that they accept other prophets than Muhammad would be a problem from the Islam point of view.
Well, wait a minute, right? Because Muhammad accepts all of the previous prophets, right?
Yeah.
Or Muslim accepts all the previous
Yeah.
prophets.
Well,
Religion is.
Yeah.
Violence, yeah. It's not really.
Super. The answer was it's a political conflict with religion as an excuse. All right. Maybe one more or wrap it up?
I want to say, I'm not sure. As a pastor of 5 years in seminary, I could do as good on Christianity.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. For being here for us, but also for the work you do to make the world a better place.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you brought your own fan club, it looks like.